Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Windup. My name is Gavin. I'm also known as the Circus Monkey. And filling in tonight, to my side here, is Jake Jollymore, the man, the myth, the legend. Nick Lombardi is off for the holiday, so Jake, thank you so much for hanging out with me. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. I'm absolutely ecstatic to be here and, let you exploit my a bit of knowledge on the MLB about you.
And welcome to the... Oops, sorry, there we go. That was my fault. My apologies.
How dare you, Gavin?
Well, if that's the kind of show we're going to have tonight, we're in great shape. Want to thank everybody for joining in with us again today. Those of you who hung out with us last night on Circus Monkey Sports, I had a chance to meet the new Whiskey Hour guys. You'll get to see them tomorrow, followed up by Jake and Nick in the evening. So super excited to have them as part of the team. But for tonight, you get the old and faithful gentleman here. So we're going to kick it off with a couple of things. We're going to start with a slightly somber note for just a moment. Want to pass out our condolences to the families of Lou Brock and Tom Seaver, two of the all-time greats in the major leagues, passed away this last week. Truly unfortunate, two just absolute legends. And again, we pass our condolences on to those guys. And I know they were great representatives of the sport, both on and off the field. And we look forward to continuing their legacy with the guys that are on the field currently. So, Jake, let's jump into what we currently have going on. We got 20 games roughly left in Major League Baseball. We're 2/3 of the way through the season. It's been a weird season. I mean, but to think we're now 2/3 of the way through, it's a bit crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, so COVID has thrown everybody's, I want to say their seasonometer. Their seasonometer off. Nobody feels like there's only 20 games left in the season. But here we are.
Travis, good evening, sir. Thank you, Travis, for joining in. One of the admins over at Bomb Sports, checking out. Appreciate you guys. Shared us and blew up our stream last week. Thank you so much for doing so, Travis. Good to see you. Heather, thank you so much for joining in. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We're in a weird part of the year where basketball is still going on when it should be over. We have baseball in its normal timeline, but considering it's in a shortened season, we're thrown off, and football only starts in just a couple days away. Jason Yeagers, hey, brother, I hope you're doing well. We've been thinking about you this week. Hope you're doing well with your family. Prayers to you guys. I know you got a lot going on, so thank you so much.
Does he have a nickname that is he the Jägermeister?
In a roundabout way, Jason Yeagers is the Jägermeister, but the joke I have with him is a little less positive when we talk about each other off screen. So, we won't go into that one, Jason. But yeah, so 20 games left in the regular season this year, and it's been a weird season, and a lot of things are going on. We're going to talk about here in just a couple of minutes. We're going to talk about some of the stats and the Cy Youngs and the MVPs and some of the rookies. But we're going to get into some crazy things also a little bit later in there, and I've got some strong opinions. Jake knows baseball is my life outside of a family of stuff, of course, but this is my primary thing. And we're going to talk a little bit about the weirdness that's going to be the minor leagues. We're going to talk about some crazy stuff going on, especially in the American League East and Central. Both have some crazy, crazy things going on. So stay tuned. We're going to jump into that. So, Jake, I know you're out on the East Coast. I know you got some really cool stuff, know quite a bit going on out there. Let's talk about Chapman. Chapman, okay? Aroldis Chapman suspended for 3 games, originally not going to appeal the suspension. Now is saying he's going to appeal the suspension. I don't know if you remember what the count was, but it was actually a count in his favor. He threw behind the batter. It looked intentional, but it didn't make sense to me, right? What's your thoughts on how they're handling some of these? You've seen some other suspensions this season. How are they handling these suspension with guys and throwing at guys? And what's your thoughts on headhunting?
Who was the batter?
It doesn't matter. He was a nobody.
Oh, okay. So there was no previous history between the two players?
Not between the two players, just between the two teams. We're talking Tampa Bay and we're talking New York. There's always some bad blood. It's within the division. They're division rivals, not true rivals like Boston, right? But division rivals.
So, I mean, if it's a nobody, if I'm Aroldis Chapman, I'm going to make that move intentionally. I'm going to go for a headhunt on one of their best hitters because they have now surpassed me in the standings. So if you're going to take anybody out, it's not going to be some nobody. That makes no sense.
I would agree.
For it to be intentional. So if the ball slipped and it's unintentional, it makes a lot more sense. He's appealing. I understand.
Well, and to top it all off, he was ahead in the count. That's what drives me a little bit nuts. And I don't like the head hunting. I think we can all agree. Anytime getting thrown a ball at your head, you can ask my parents. They'll jump in the chat probably in a couple of minutes and say hello. But I've been hitting the head. I was hitting the head at 92 miles an hour. It shattered my helmet. It rung my bell pretty good. Aroldis Chapman throws triple digits. He's throwing 100 plus, right? So head hunting obviously is not something you should do. And considering the count, I don't know. It looked intentional, but I can't understand it being intentional. And I'm still just kind of confused. Jake, we've talked to you a lot about some of the suspensions. I know we won't beat the dead horse with Houston and all the stuff going on in Houston with the lack of suspensions. But you see Joe Kelly throw changeups and curveballs behind a batter. He gets 8 games, right? A little bit chirping. Can
we just bring this up real quick? How is Joe Kelly going to be the guy to physically be the one to try to put the Astros in their place? Of all freaking people, like, he wasn't on the cheating Red Sox team.
That is the other side of the coin, right? We all, and I think we can all agree that what Houston did was probably the wrong thing. Definitely shouldn't be done in Major League Baseball. But considering, yes, that Joe Kelly was part of a team that has also been accused of and mostly proven to have done some sort of cheating scandal, Joe Kelly is probably not the guy, the poster child to be throwing at the other team. At the same time, you have to respect the guy for helping out his teammates, right?
It happened twice while he was a member of the Red Sox. They had 2 separate cheating scandals with Joe Kelly, and he's the guy that's going to go after the Astros.
So that's the crazy part. So there's a lot of guys that are in this situation, just like Mike Fiers, right? Mike Fiers, who's now in Oakland, talking a lot of crap about what was going on, but he was on Houston when it all happened, and now he's the poster child for the guys coming out and speaking out against it. So there's a lot of just weirdness going on when it relates to what's going on in suspensions and all that. But when we talk about Aroldis Chapman, throwing behind a guy on a 2-2 count when it doesn't actually help him to do so. It's not like he was 3-0 and said, screw it, I'm going to throw it, dude. It was on a 2-2 count. He was ahead in the count. He ended up striking the guy out on the next pitch anyway. That was the part that just threw me off. So we're going to see Chapman get suspended for 3 games. He is going to appeal it. I would expect we might get it down to 1 or 2 games instead.
Wait. He wasn't ejected.
He was not originally ejected, no.
Then there's no suspension. No. Consistency. I said the same thing with the NFL. Give me consistency. If he was not ejected by the umpires, under no circumstance should he be getting a suspension to begin with. So if the umpires on the field didn't call it, then he's fine.
So the only argument is that you can slow it down and look at look for intent and those sort of things. I agree with you. That is the argument to the other side of the equation. While I agree, if the umpires on the field were not feeling the tense nature of a situation in which he then threw at a batter and then he didn't get ejected, then I would tend to personally side with the umpires at that point. But in the same time, you can review a call later and you can actually make that call. That is something they allow, whether it should or shouldn't be done. They do actually still allow that to be done.
Video replay is killing every sport.
I was never a fan of video replay in the first place, considering they still get it wrong more often than they get it right, in my opinion.
Look at the NFL catch rule. We still don't know what a catch is.
Well, all these years later, they've now said that Dez actually did catch it, right? And then Calvin Johnson, the one where it scraped the ground after he caught it and said he didn't. All that stuff is really crazy to me. But so Chapman's getting suspended regardless of what we want. He is going to appeal the suspension. I expect to have him back. On the other side of the coin, some good news, some fun news. We talk about Mike Trout seeming almost every week in some fashion. His baseball card is setting records for how much money it's being sold for. He's hitting home runs after coming back from being a father for the first time. Well, this time it's an overall career stat, right? And Jake, we all know the name Willie Mays, right? I mean, everybody's heard of Willie Mays, right?
Yeah, I think so. If you even moderately know baseball, you know who Willie Mays is.
Absolutely. So Willie Mays reached these same stats as Mike Trout, but it took him 60 games more. Mike Trout has now reached 300 career home runs and 200 career stolen bases, and again, did it 60 games faster than Willie Mays. Unreal.
Okay, so Mike Trout is only 29 years old.
Correct.
Which means in a bad situation, he still has 10 years of ball left.
Yes, and as long as he can stay healthy on the field, he's going to have some incredible next 10 years, and he better be considering they signed him for another 10 years as well.
I mean, that's fair. But where I'm going with this, is there a chance he becomes the first, let's say, 700, 500?
So when you really think about the math of it, right? When you think about a guy like Mike Trout, let's say he hits 25 home runs over the next 10 years on average. That's only another 250. That's 550. Okay. So he's going to have to hit considerably more than that, right? So now we break down the numbers. You're talking about 300 if he hits 30 a season on average. So he's only at 300 as it sits. So he's going to have to do some work to get to that 700 mark. I realistically think we could see a no problem 600, 400 type player, which is unreal numbers. Nobody is doing that in the history of baseball. No one's putting up 600 home runs and 400 stolen bases. And in today's game, you're not stealing bases at the level that they used to. No one's pulling any Ricky Hendersons out there, right? But I would love to see him hit 700. I just don't see the math happening that way for Mike Trout.
Give me 1 second. I'm fact-checking that.
That's fine with me. We'll keep moving. So Mike Trout, obviously a generational talent. Mike Trout hitting 300 home runs and 200 stolen bases in that amount of time is just unreal. Anytime you beat Willie Mays to a
Somebody has done it.
What's that?
600 home runs and 400 stolen bases.
Barry Bonds?
No.
Who's that?
Babe Ruth.
Oh, Babe Ruth. I did not know he had the stolen base numbers like that. So.
Neither did I.
That's an impressive stat. Regardless of whichever way it ends, Mike Trout is a generational talent. I cannot wait to see the remainder of his career. Fantastic numbers, fantastic guy, and kind of leading the way that stars. I would love to see that. Now I'm all for guys speaking their minds and being like that, but the guy is just he goes out there. He's a professional every day, does his thing, doesn't hype himself up in the media. He's almost the superstar the MLB has to hate because he doesn't want the limelight, right? So it's hard to promote a guy that doesn't want to be promoted.
I was going to say, when he's your best player in the league and he doesn't want to be the face of the league, you have a problem.
Absolutely. At the same time, you have to respect the guy for wanting to be that quiet giant at the same time. You know, we see some of the guys in the NFL. Calvin Johnson was one of my favorites. Guy's one of the best in his position in the history of the game, and he's just a very quiet guy. Mike Trout, even a higher level talent in his position and the same type of thing. But now we're going to talk about some other guys. We're going to talk about somebody who's putting up some ridiculous numbers to a point where he's in the same category as a young player, going to head that direction, but he's not quiet about it, and he shouldn't be quiet about it because people have tried to push him down the last couple of weeks, and he just doesn't deserve to be done that way. Fernando Tatis Jr., I almost have like a little bit of a baseball crush on this guy, right? He's putting up Alex Rodriguez type numbers, okay? And here comes the arbitrary stat of the day, right? For the first 42 games of a season, he has the second most home runs in history of shortstops through 42 games. He has hit 16 home runs to this point. 15 home runs to this point. Only one has done better. Alex Rodriguez hitting for 16 home runs in the first 42 games one other time. But the only other shortstop to even come to those numbers is Alex Rodriguez 3 other times, right? So now Fernando Tatis Jr., as long as he stays off the steroids, is putting himself in a category with one of the all-time greats. I can't wait to see him do more of this.
Okay. How much of this, with such a young player, can we equate to the fact that there's no fans in the seats?
So there's the question mark, right? People have asked the question, in general, how does the fans being there or not being there affect them positively or negatively? And maybe for some of the young guys who haven't had the giant crowds as often, it may not mean as much, and it could do something. I don't know that it truly affects them in a positive or negative fashion. I've never played in front of 60,000 people. I've played in front of thousands, but never that many. And honest to goodness, when I was on the field, I never noticed whether it was just my mom screaming my name from behind the home plate or it was crowds of people. Again, it's not 60,000 people. We're talking 8,000 people. But these guys being professionals, I almost, at first it seemed like it bothered them a little bit. Maybe that was more the veterans than the young guys. But guys like Tatis are just out there playing around. I don't know that this personally affected him.
Well, look at somebody like Giancarlo Stanton. Having no fans helped him immensely. It didn't help him stay healthy. Let's make that very clear.
I don't think he has not enough help in the world for that.
Apparently, he's made it last, and the Yankees are on that tab, and I'm happy about that. Moving on. Players like Stanton got helped immensely by there being no extra noise. Because let's be real, the fake piped-in crowd noise isn't the same. The NFL is trying it. It's going to be a mess. It's eh. And then somebody like Tatis or Bo Bichette was lighting up before he got injured. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., pretty much the entire offense of the Toronto Blue Jays. They're all young. They're all turning into superstars in front of our eyes. But what's going to happen when crowds come back? Are they going to stay at that consistency, or is the noise and the noise level going to mess with their heads again?
So I think your point is very similar to, I think you're absolutely right. Based on what you're saying, there's a good chance that not having the noise has allowed some of these young players to stay along the level that they've been used to in the minors and in other situations where there hasn't been a lot of noise. It's just their comfort zone. And on the flip side, the veteran guys are used to having that. I mean, you look at guys, take a Ryan Braun, for instance, right? He loves getting booed. He's talked about it before. He loves going to Chicago, having them boo him and him walk out and try to hit a home run, right? So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a chance that we could see a dip in performance potentially next year in the young players, and maybe a rise in performance back from some of those long-term veteran players. And I'm sure there's a couple guys in the no-man zone that's been in the majors for 3 or 4 years, but also still remembers what it's like to play minor league baseball with very few fans. That's a very good point, something I hadn't thought about, and I'm glad you brought that up. It will be interesting to watch that. So, as to your point, watch a Fernando Tatis, a Bo Bichette, a Kayvon Biggio, Guerrero, some of those guys as we watch Lewis Robert, right? One of the bright, in my opinion, the rookie of the year. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see how they perform next year without the silence, right? Should be interesting.
Random question, because I haven't been. One kid, when that caught my eye, was Dooning in Chicago.
Sure.
I don't know if he had a second start. I know he had a immensely amazing first start, and I don't even know his first name. Guys, I told you, we're going to exploit my lack of knowledge in baseball tonight. As I said when I shared this, it's going to be a shit show.
I don't know if he's had another start, but a lot of these, like you said, I think pitching will definitely be affected. I think pitchers are creatures of habit, right? Pitchers like to have the same catcher. They get to pick the uniform for the day. Generally speaking, we see that they will. They talk about the routine. They wear the same socks, so they'll eat the same cheeseburger or whatever they've done the game where they pitch the best. They'll do the same thing over and over again. So pitchers, that creature of habit, hearing that noise as they go up to the mound, hearing that cheer as they strike someone out, I think it will affect the pitching. We've seen some of the numbers. The hitting numbers are very good this year. So we have our elite pitchers pitching incredibly well. But that mid-tier, it's almost like a pretty dramatic drop-off when we pull up some of the stats on the pitching side of things and just MLB overall. You're looking at, as it pulls up with me here, you got a couple of guys when it comes to ERAs. You got 5 guys under 2. So you got your elite pitchers, Shane Bieber out of Cleveland, Darvish, DeGrom, and those guys are all pitching well. But I don't see anybody on this list in the top ERA that is one of the super young pitching stars, right? You got a couple that are pitching very well, but most of them start to break 2. Even an ERA in 2 is great. But to your point, some of those veteran guys are pitching very well regardless, and some of these young guys don't have that rhythm. And maybe it's affecting pitching and hitting in a different way.
Real quick, Heather, when you ask that question, do you see Aaron Judge be like a Derek Jeter type player? What exactly do you mean by that? What is the context of that question?
Yeah, do you mean overall career numbers
or do you
mean as a leader?
So going back to your hittings up this year, there are 32 players as it stands right now with a 300 or better batting average. It's across the league going through this. There's a good amount of different teams represented here. So it's not like one team is like the Yankees are just batting really good. No, we have Arizona, Atlanta, San Diego, Texas, Tampa Bay, Chicago, Arizona, Toronto, Seattle, Detroit, Boston, LA. Yeah.
Yeah, the numbers are incredible. So I wonder if we're seeing that the focus on some of those things. We're seeing power numbers are very good. I mean, look how many guys we have in double digits. I'm scrolling through.
I was just about to. So we have a tie for 19th, which is actually going to be 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. There are 30 people that have over 10 home runs in 40 games.
Gotcha. So Heather says, so she's talking about Judge versus Jeter in a leadership and hitting capacity. So
Jeter never had power.
No.
Jeter had contact. Aaron Judge's contact is absolute garbage. He only has power, which you can give and take. I don't think Aaron Judge finishes his career in New York.
I'm not sure he will either. And they're two. It's hard to compare the two for a couple of reasons. One, positional expectations, right? What you expected out of a shortstop in his time in Major League Baseball is different than what you expect out of a corner outfielder in baseball currently. Generally speaking, you're looking at corner outfielders to be strong arm throwers and heavy power hitters, right? You're not, generally speaking, looking for high average numbers. Derek Jeter, as you mentioned, he's not a home run hitter, never was. He can still hit them. He hit plenty of them, but he was never going to win a home run title. The flip side, Aaron Judge is probably not going to be a guy that has the chance to hit 350 every single season. He's going to strike out an enormous amount of times, but he's going to drop 40, 50 bombs sometimes. The other problem is Jeter just seemed to have this ability to stay healthy for the most part that Aaron Judge does not seem to have. So that's going to also change the expectations in their career path. And to the point of which one is going to, I mean, leadership-wise, I don't know that we'll ever see another leader quite like a Derek Jeter, right? And it's not a knock on Aaron Judge, but I've never really seen him, and Jay can correct me if I'm wrong, you're an East Coast guy, so you've heard the stories more than I have. I've not heard of him being an outspoken leader. I've not heard of him taking a back seat either, but he's the face as a player, not necessarily the face of the team as an outspoken leader.
Looking at Aaron Judge right now, his best batting average of his career is happening this year at 292. He won't even ever have a 300 season.
And again, the expectations of a corner outfielder with his size and expectations, if he hits 275 plus, they're going to be happy with it because he's also going to hit 30, 40, 50 home runs. That is the expectation for him. So, yeah, it's tough to argue those two different players. Brandon has a great follow-up question to that, and that question is Judge or Stanton, who leaves the Yankees first? It's obvious in my opinion.
I also think it's obvious, but we might differ here.
I think Giancarlo Stanton leaves the Yankees first.
Oh, yeah, we do differ. Okay.
All right, tell me why you think Judge leaves first.
So, we all know Giancarlo Stanton is tied to the Yankees for the next, I think it's still 9 years off that technical Miami contract. And yeah, we can easily just say the Yankees will trash the contract and pay for it, but no team wants to hit the luxury tax for a player they're not. Look at Pablo Sandoval for crying out loud in Boston. This is the final season we're paying him. Oh, my. So Stanton is going to be tied to New York almost as long as he plays, where as soon as Judge goes up to get paid, he's hitting free agency.
So I understand what you're saying, and I agree to a point. Yes, the part I agree with, Giancarlo Stanton is tied to New York with that contract, and it makes him very difficult for him to go anywhere or anyone else to want to grab him, right? And if the Yankees cut him, another team then can wait till waivers clear. They can pick him up. They don't have to pay him that stupid amount of money. I get that part of it, and the tough part then comes in. The Yankees are still the Yankees, and if they're not getting what they want, they have been known to play with that luxury tax. And while they may not want to do it, there is a chance they could still do it. They might get Giancarlo Stanton to rework his contract and then work out a trade situation. There are those opportunities. And to the part where I disagree with you is the fact that Aaron Judge is never going to be anything other than a Yankee until the end of his career, right? Until he's probably another worthless, in my opinion. I don't think we will see him play in anything other than pinstripes till the very end of his career. There's no way you can justify not keeping him around unless he has some sort of major injury that changes permanently the way he plays the game of baseball. I would see him in New York for a very, very long time.
So real quick, because I looked at Aaron Judge's stats, and I'm looking at it just based on his stat line right now. I have to admit, Aaron Judge might be the most overrated outfielder in Yankees history.
His career numbers are not what you would hope, what was expected of him. His power numbers are the only thing that has kept him, in the light and in positive standing, should I say, with Yankees fans, and the fact that the potential is still there. And if he can find a season to get healthy and stay that way, that he could end up being an all-time great. But it's going to take some time.
One full season in his entire career. It's 2017. He led the league in home runs with 52. He also struck out 208 times. Also led the league. And then in 2018, he only played in 112 games, only 27 home runs, which means he wasn't even on pace to tie that 52.
Correct.
And then 102 games in 2019, also had 27, still not on pace to hit that 52. And then this year he had 9 home runs in 18 games, which is absolutely astronomical. He's probably another player that having no fans helped.
Yeah, he was playing some lights out baseball until that injury caught up. Now he is supposed to be back on the field sometime here in the near future. They don't have an exact time frame, but they expect him to be back soon before the end of the regular season so that he can get himself ramped up for the playoffs, right? So we'll stay with the Yankees for just a second. Since we're already there, there's a chance they don't make the playoffs, right? So which is something you don't hear very often when it comes to saying Yankees and not making the playoffs. As of recent, the New York Yankees have actually fallen into third place within their own division, right? They're on a 3-game losing streak, and they are now 6.5 games back of the first spot in the division and a game back of the second spot. And as a reminder, for those of you who've forgotten, the top 2 in each division and then the next 2 best overall records in each side of the league make it in. So the Yankees don't have to be in the top 2, but that's how you make sure you're there, being one of the top 2 teams in the division. And young Toronto and the crazy Tampa Bay Rays have found their way into those top 2 spots.
So right now the Yankees are sitting in that second wild card.
Correct.
Which is the normal host of this show, Nick, is a diehard Yankees fan. And I swear you should have heard him at the beginning of the season when the Yankees started wicked hot. I would love to have him on the show with me right now just to hear his thoughts. Tampa Bay is a surprise team, though. If anybody was going to do this, I expected it to be Toronto.
Correct.
Because Toronto is the wild card team with all that young talent, but it's all young, really top prospect kind of talent. So the Yankees falling to third is no big surprise, given they paid for Garrett Cole and Garrett Cole's not working out.
Again, Garrett Cole could be a project of one, having a short amount of time to switch to become to a new atmosphere. He's used to, at the same time, he was a World Series champion. He's used to having that craziness stuff going on, the crowds around him. So this could be affecting him. I think he'll get it right. He's always wanted to be a Yankee since the time he was a kid. I think Garrett Cole will figure it out and have a good career with the Yankees. The part that's good crazy to me is not only is Tampa Bay taking over the first spot in the division, they are the top overall team in the American League altogether at 28-13. The numbers that Tampa Bay has come around, and we talked about it several weeks ago, Nick and I did, is that Tampa Bay finds a way. They're not as successful as the Patriots, so don't take it that way, but they're like the Patriots of the American League East. They find a way to put weird people in weird spots and still be successful, right? The difference is they don't always win the championship or regularly win the championship, but they're almost always in the mix of things. They're always finding a way to make themselves a contender in some fashion with people that no one's ever heard of. You know, a guy like Avisail Garcia had a great season for them last year and turned it into a big contract with the Brewers this year, right? They brought a guy like Brett Phillips in from Kansas City. I would expect him to find some crazy way of playing great baseball. Last season, 2 trades for first baseman in G-Man Choi and Jesus Aguilar, and found ways to get themselves into the playoffs with players that other teams did not want, right? So it's crazy how Tampa Bay just keeps finding ways to make themselves relevant when it comes to this time of the season heading in towards the playoffs.
A lot of this has to do with how short the season is. If the Yankees had a full season in time for Judge and Stanton and DJ LeMahieu and all of them to actually get healthy, they are actually unstoppable. They are the dream team of baseball. Now, the dream team, historically speaking, doesn't always do so well. And that's kind of what's happening here. It's the baseball gods raining down on the New York Yankees parade like, no, you want to buy all the talent, literally, we're not letting you do that. So they're getting injured. Yeah, I just said the baseball gods are injuring the New York Yankees. Let's let that sink in.
Yeah, so it's a weird season in general. The AL East is it's going to be coming down to the wire. If Judge gets healthy, they sat Gary Sanchez already. If he can get his head out of his rear end and get that going, and he gets back on the field, they're going to be in good shape. DJ LeMahieu and Stanton also need to get back 100% healthy. They have a chance to figure it out. They're barely at this point squeaking into the playoffs, but there's still 20 games, and 20 games generally isn't a lot of games, but it's still a third of this year's season. So while we're 2/3 of the way through, there's still a good chunk of games left. Expect it to get very highly contested there. and the Yankees should make the playoffs. But if they don't, it's going to be a huge kind of shot to the reputation of the New York Yankees when you bring in Cole, when you have Stanton and Judge and all these guys, and still can't figure out a way into the playoffs. This would be a giant blow to that team.
Two things. Number one, I'm going to start with a thing that has absolutely nothing to do with this. Heather, if you have any questions about the Red Sox, now is the time to ask. I am here. I will be able to answer them perfectly for you. Number two, if the Yankees don't even make the playoffs, how in any way, shape, or form, or what will the Yankees do? Will they fire sale the entire team, or will they add pieces to next year? Or will they try to write it off as a COVID screwed us kind of situation?
I see it being two of those three things you just mentioned. I see it as a partial going, okay, it's COVID. It's a weird year. It's 60 games. It's no fans. There's injuries. I see them going part that and part going, okay, let's be the Yankees again, right? Let's go out and find the pieces we need to fill the holes. You've now seen what holes you have, right? You now go fill those holes. I don't see a fire sale. I don't see people getting fired just in general in the front office or anything like that. I think people are generally going to get a pass. And I know this is the Yankees. They're not in the habit of losing, but they're also not in the habit of sitting back and letting it ever happen again, right? So I would expect them to jump right in and find the missing pieces that they need and make themselves into another championship quality team. Example, like the 90s. They back then would just buy whatever talent they needed versus home growing it. They've got a mixture in their program right now, and I would expect them to pull in more from the outside if necessary.
So I'm looking, and just because it's the Yankees potentially being the Yankees, I'm looking at the current notable free agents for 2021. And I have to say this might be one of the worst free agent classes I have ever seen.
There aren't a ton of big names that are going to be just thrown around out there this next season.
It's really headlined by the outfielders with George Springer, Michael Brantley, Jock Peterson, Jackie Bradley Jr., and Giancarlo Stanton has an opt-out. There's no way in hell he's opting out, but he does have an opt-out.
Unless he gets hit in the head and has no idea what he's doing, he will not opt out of that contract. There's just no way that's going to happen.
Absolutely. And then you have Corey Kluber on a club option, so he's probably staying.
Probably.
Trevor Bauer, Robbie Ray, James Paxton, Masahiro Tanaka, Marcus Stroman, Jose Quintana, and Jake Arrieta also on a club option. Now, I say that for a reason. That's going to lead straight into Heather's comment. What do the Red Sox need to do for next season? And right under, she already covered it. The Red Sox need a big, tight pitcher.
Absolutely.
So halfway through the season, the Red Sox are going to get Chris Sale back. After his Tommy John, they waited far too long for that to happen.
Unfortunately, you're absolutely correct. They did wait too long. If they pulled the trigger sooner, at the same time, the players sometimes mask that injury and to the extent that it is in hopes that it'll just suddenly magically, fix itself. But Chris Sale looked very sick, didn't look healthy, and then obviously it turned into the surgery. Once
the season was pushed back, he should have been in surgery that day.
Well, that's what Noah Syndergaard did for the Mets, right? And he got into it early on enough into the season, what would have been the regular part of the season, where he's going to be back and ready to go for the start of next season. And absolutely right. Chris Sale should have done the exact same thing, and it would have been good for Boston. But unfortunately, he didn't. I still would expect him again. He'll be rested and ready to go by the mid part of the season, which will be very good for him. But yes, absolutely. The Red Sox need to go after pitching. They need to find some free agents that they can. And even if it's mid-level pitching out of the free agency group, it's going to be an improvement over what they have now. So you get Chris Sale back, get some mid-level to higher-level pitching, get something in there that just gets some energy for those players, on the mound. And it's going to also light the bats up. When they feel confident that a pitching staff is going to give them, the innings that they need so that they can swing the bat well, it's going to bode well for both sides.
I want you to know, I can't even name all the guys that have started a game for the Red Sox this year.
Most Red Sox fans can. At this point, the season is it's been lost for quite some time. And at this point, you find out what do you have, right? You play some of the young players, you figure out what you have, you find which pieces you have, just like you were talking about, did the Yankees fire sale and anything like that? The Red Sox are figuring it out right now. What do they have? What can they bring in next year? And what do they absolutely have to go out and find for next year to be contenders? Because as we know, Boston is no longer in the habit of being a bottom of the barrel type team. They haven't been in quite some time. So they're going to take a bad year. They're going to wave it off to COVID, and they're going to go out there and try to find some of the pieces to try to make it better for this next season. And they got a lot of work to do, though.
So I'm looking at the roster right now, and for pitchers alone, I can literally only name 3 of them. I know Martin Perez, I know Matt Barnes, and I know Marcus Walden. Everybody else, when did they get on the Red Sox?
Probably some point in the middle of this season. So
that's a safe bet. Nathan Eovaldi and Eduardo Rodriguez are both on the 10-day DL. But yeah, so of those free agents, either you need to get 3 of them, or you need to get 1, maybe 2 of them, and make a big trade for somebody.
Absolutely.
Because what I just saw isn't going to get you even like remotely close to the playoffs.
Correct.
Matt Hall. Who the hell is Matt Hall?
So that kind of sums up the AL East, right? They got some interesting games still to play ahead. A lot of games still to go. But I'm going to jump to the Central, right? And the reason I'm going to the Central is we've talked about it. There are 3 teams that are only separated by 1 game. And it's a team that I actually chose as my preseason World Series champions, and that's the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox are hitting well for average. They're hitting well for power. They're playing some great defense, and they're sitting atop the AL Central, at 26-15. Now this is where it gets crazy. You got Cleveland, who just traded away one of their pitchers in Clevenger, but have, in my opinion, the Cy Young Award winner in the American League to be in Shane Bieber. They're sitting at a half game back at 25-15, and Minnesota at 26-17, a full game back. And Minnesota has, in my opinion, the American League MVP in Nelson Cruz. So this division is getting crazy. You have the White Sox on a 4-game win streak, Cleveland on a 2-game win streak, Minnesota only on 1. But those 3 teams are in a battle. And as you mentioned, when we look at the playoff lineup, you got the White Sox sitting at the 2 overall seed, the Indians sitting at the 4 overall seed, and the Twins are in that another one of the wild card positions in the American League. So you're going to see 3 teams out of that division. Tim Norton, what's up, Coach? Tim Norton played baseball with and against Tim for quite some time myself. Sox, the team to beat. I hate saying it because you're a Cubs fan, but at least thank you for being a reasonable Cubs fan or a baseball fan in general. You're absolutely right. The concern, Tim, and tell me what you think, because I know you're a big baseball guy as well, Tim, they don't have the pitching to compete in the postseason. You got Giolito and you got Dallas Keuchel, but those 2 guys, we haven't seen 2 pitchers dominate a playoff series since Kurt Schilling and Randy Johnson kept that team in Arizona alive. Since then, I have not seen 2 pitchers dominate that way that Giolito and Dallas Keuchel would have to in order for them to make a playoff run. That is my concern. They didn't go out and get Clevenger. They didn't go out and get Lance Lynn. And if they had gotten 1 more pitcher, I truly think that my preseason prediction probably would come true. And now I'm starting to wonder a little bit if they're going to be able to pull that together.
So just doing what I do, I'm looking right now at their starting rotation. As you said, you have Lucas in Dallas. Dylan Cease is 3rd. Carlos Rondon is 4th. And Dane Dooning is 5th. He has actually, it looks like, pitched in 3 games. And in none of them has he gone more than 5 innings.
Correct.
It's a rough start to his career. I wouldn't trust him in the playoffs. I'd be putting him in the I was just about to say.
So Tim says agree, but they can win a 3-game series and get to the second round. True, correct. That is a good point. First round gives them an opportunity to continue moving.
If you can get Lucas to get a win in game 1, with Dallas in 2, worry about Carlos or Dylan for game 3, maybe squeak out a win, maybe you lose, cut it right there, because the way the playoffs are set, you can once again go back to Lucas and have Lucas pitch game 4. Hopefully win that, take it in 3, and move on. You're probably not getting past the second round, though.
The second round is where it becomes worrisome. But now on the flip side, the positive thing for them is looking at some of their best offensive weapons they have sitting out there right now. They have a great shortstop in Tim Anderson. He's hitting .351. You got Jose Abreu playing first base, hitting .315. You got Eloy Jimenez hitting .281. Rookie Luis Robert hitting 266, Yasmani Grandal, the catcher, hitting 257, and Yohan Moncada batting 237. Those are your top 6 hitters for them. That is some great numbers from a hitting perspective. Then we add in the addition of the power numbers. They have 3 home run hitters in double digits. Abreu with 13, Jimenez and Luis Robert with 11. But then they still have a guy with 8, 7, 5, 5. They've been hitting for power as well as for decent for average. So again, to your point about if you can get with your first 2 guys, get a couple of wins, that batting, that lineup might get them, propel them through to the next win, or at least getting it back to them so one of those guys can win the next game. So it does give them an opportunity. But again, the big question is, can they make a deep run with that pitching staff? I wish they'd gone out and gotten a Lance Lynn or somebody like that. Then I'd say, yes, they could make a deep run. At this point, it does look like they're almost a one series and done in the postseason. I hope I'm wrong, because I love watching Luis Robert play. One of the best young, exciting players we've seen in quite some time. They're calling him the next Mike Trout, and if you've watched any of the highlights he's made, he's done a damn good job of looking just like him. And like I said, that is the White Sox. I know Brandon Herrera has talked a little bit about this, and this is his comment. Twins are going to be taking all the trophies this year. I take that to the bank. So let's stay with the Twins for just a second. Jake, I had mentioned before I was going to talk about who I have for my MVP. I'll go ahead and mention it. My American League MVP is Nelson Cruz. Nelson Cruz obviously playing for the Twins. The Twins having a good season. They've actually probably had a more consistent season than the White Sox. The White Sox have won in bigger streaks, but they started out a little bit low in the division to begin with and have climbed up. Minnesota's kind of hovered in that 1-2 spot for the most of the time, but they're sitting at 26-17, and that's some darn good information. Brandon, you post the trivia question I asked you. Yes, I will get that. I will get Jake to see if he knows the answer or not. I'll bet I know.
Boy.
But we'll get that in a
boy.
second. So the Twins are sitting, like I said, at that number. When we look at Nelson Cruz stats, Nelson Cruz is individually essentially leading that team towards a title. He's batting .329, and at the same time, when it comes to home runs, he is one of the tops in home runs as well. But he's also producing, he's at 13 home runs, so he's towards the top. I think he's tied for 5th right now. And so Nelson Cruz is playing as a young man's game. Some guys will talk about Trout. Some people will talk about Anthony Rendon. There's some conversations about, Abreu and others in the American League, but nobody's doing what Nelson Cruz is doing at his age, essentially willing that team to that next level. So watch out for Minnesota Twins. And
so I was going to bring up Jose Abreu just from a cold look right now at the stats. There's a huge – they have the same amount of home runs, but there's a huge difference in 40 runs batted in and 29 runs batted in.
Correct.
And, yeah, you have Nelson Cruz, who's about 14 points in the batting average higher. But from all accounts of all these stats that I'm looking at cold right here in front of me, Abreu takes that MVP.
So Abreu was in my top 3, and at this point I was leading strictly more towards what Nelson Cruz is doing, strictly because he's doing better for his team as a whole. The White Sox have multiple hitters performing similar to what Abreu is doing, and I have Nelson Cruz as a player that is doing more as an individual. And again, he's in my top 3, and it's current numbers. It could change. I could see Abreu just running away with it as well. But it's hard to argue, and I guess maybe I'm giving Nelson Cruz maybe a little more credit strictly because of his age than maybe I should be. But you're right. Their RBI numbers are just absolutely phenomenal when it comes to what Abreu is doing. They're hitting 315 at the same time is still a great number. It's tough when you look at it.
He actually leads the league in RBIs.
Which is not surprising. That guy has absolutely an insane amount of talent when it comes to that team. And I've always liked Abreu. I trade for him when I play in the MLB video games myself.
He almost got traded to Boston.
I know. I'm glad he didn't, but
I'm not.
So that is the central. So Jake, does that mean we talked a little bit about it? If you were leaning towards someone, does that mean you're leaning a little bit more towards Abreu as your potential MVP yourself?
That is correct.
Gotcha. So let's stay with the MVPs for a second. And there's been some conversation. I got into a Twitter argument with the guy the other day over this. And when it comes to the National League MVP, I went with Fernando Tatis Jr. to this point, right? And part of what Tatis gets, in addition to his stats, is the energy and the excitement he brings to the game, the fact that he definitely makes his team better. for all accounts. But just the excitement of the player, it's hard to, whether you agree with that or not, it's going to help propel him into the limelight when it comes to voting for that position. Tatis will get some of that credit for being a kind of an exciting player to watch. He's hitting 15 home runs. He's tied for the lead. He's got 7 stolen bases, 39 RBIs, and batting .311, right? It's some incredible numbers, especially for only being 21 years old in a second year in the league.
So, again, just cold looking at the stats. I see where you're going with for Tatis Jr., but when you're 19th in the batting average at .311, and then you have somebody like Trey Turner batting .365, which, if we're being honest, the guy that's leading the batting average is probably going to take the MVP. There's a very few and far between.
The only problem with Trey Turner is, and again, when it comes, he's only got 9 home runs. He's only got 23 RBIs. So it's always tough because a lot of times you put it into the flashy numbers, but he's way ahead in one of the slightly less flashy numbers. Home runs tend to catch everyone's eye versus batting average. I like batting average because I could never hit home runs in the first place. But by the way,
that batting average is, I mean, the next closest guy to him in the NL is Michael Conforto at .348.
Actually, it's I'm sorry, you're on the right. I'm clicking on the wrong thing. Bear with me 1 second. There we go.
I skipped Tim Anderson.
No, you're right. Yeah, so Tim Anderson would have been as the American League leader on that. But yeah, Conforto at .348. But again, Tatis Jr. So one of the things we look at, well, let's talk about the NBA for a second when it comes to MVP. If you went strictly off the flashy numbers, or you strictly went off of what everyone sees, James Harden wins the MVP this season and wins the MVP last season. Instead, Giannis actually ended up winning the MVP last year, likely to win it again this year, strictly because he did put up great numbers in addition to what he meant to his team. And I think that's where a guy like Trey Turner would probably not get it. He doesn't pass the eye test. He doesn't put up the numbers that catch everybody's attention, the ones that allow everybody to go, oh yeah, Trey Turner, he's the superstar up in Washington. Nobody knows unless you follow baseball, right? Even people who don't like baseball have heard of Fernando Tatis, have heard of Mike Trout, have heard of guys like that. That's the reason why I wouldn't lean towards a guy like a Trey Turner, or in this case, even a Michael Conforto putting up numbers at the top of the leaderboard and the batting average as well.
Mookie Betts also stands out.
Mookie Betts absolutely stands out. His power numbers, the mixture of both power and average, are another one. And that's why I still personally, I think you see a guy like Mookie Betts, Fernando Tatis Jr., and even Mikey Yastrzemski. I know his average is a little bit lower, but what the guy has done for a bad team has been incredible. He is batting just over 300. He's got 8 home runs, but he's been kind of an all-around player. So if we take strictly the offensive numbers out of it and factor in a little bit of defense, you're going to take in kind of into the equation a guy like even Mike Yastrzemski. A little bit further down the line,
I had to go looking for him. He's not batting under over 300.
he is batting 301.
He's batting 296.
That must have changed because according to MLB.com, but some of those guys, I like him as an option for it. Again, we had a lot of time left in the season. We'll see where it ends up mixing out. But right now, again, I still got Tatis and Nelson Cruz's mine. I like your call at Abreu. If you had to throw your money, just looking at the numbers, who you throwing your money on?
Jordan Zicker just brought up a very good point in the comments. Bring that comment up, and I'll give you the answer.
Who are the WAR and OPS leaders? Those are the new stat voters place and a lot of importance on now. Being interested to see who those leaders are.
You see my smile?
Yes.
It's Mookie Betts and Jose Abreu.
So again, those two were in my top 3 in both sides of the league. But again, everything that I've read, all the baseball writers that do the voting, Tatis is still everybody's front runner when it comes to the National League. American League seems to be a little bit more open.
Sexy new young star, and I don't say sexy as in like he's actually sexy. I mean like it's good to look at that new star.
Absolutely, I agree. That's why I said like
Mookie Betts' WAR is 2.9.
What's that?
My bad.
Okay.
Mookie Betts' WAR is 2.9. The next closest to him is Jose Abreu at 2.2. That's a huge difference for wins above replacement.
Absolutely, and it's hard to argue with those numbers. And to Jordan's point, those new stats that weren't around you even 10 years ago, weren't even looked at, do play a big factor into looking at players and how you're going to mix them with others within your organization. There's more to it, the Moneyball type thing, right? There's more to it than strictly just hitting home runs and hitting for average. It's who's going to fit with who. What piece do you need to make your team better? And yes, WAR has been the hottest stat outside of the obvious batting average and home runs out of anything else. OPS is something that's really come along strong the last couple of years, which I like. I like the OPS as well. I think it's good to look at versus just guys who are dropping home runs. Is how are you also getting on base when you're not hitting home runs, right? And that's a big one.
So for OPS, we have Ian Happ is the leader at 1.079. Mike Trout's in second. Tatis is in third. Nelson Cruz is fourth. Mookie Betts is eighth.
Yeah, so I mean, again, a lot of stats, and there's a lot of time still left in it. So I like Mookie Betts as an option. I like Jose Abreu. I still like my picks. Jose Abreu, I think, has a better chance of passing Cruz than Betts does of passing Tatis. A lot of game, though, left. We do have two guys in the National League that generally have issues with injury as of late as well. With Tatis, he had that massive injury and missed a good chunk of the season last year. If he stays healthy, I still think he finds a way to win the MVP in the National League.
See, I'd put my money on Jose Abreu and Mookie Betts, especially now that I just saw Mookie Betts' WAR is so much higher than everybody else in the league.
I'm okay with that. I wouldn't mind seeing it. I don't mind Mookie Betts. I'm personally not a big fan of the Dodgers. I don't want to see a Dodgers-Yankees World Series.
Don't get me started on Mookie Betts.
I know, being a Boston guy, right? So this is the next thing I was going to bring up. Where does Shane Bieber, where does he fit? Shane Bieber, for those of you who don't know, is the pitcher for the Cleveland Indians. Shane Bieber right now, his stats, I have it right in front of me here. He is pitching, he's 7-0. He is first place in the American League in wins. He is first place in ERA at a 1.25. He is in first place for strikeouts at 95, and he is in second place for WHIP at a 0.85. WHIP means how many people in general get on base per inning. So whether it's a hit, a walk, a hit by a pitch, how many people get on base? Walks plus hits per inning pitched, right? So he's second place in that. So in many of the major categories, in those, he is number one. A 1.25 ERA, I don't care whether at this point in the season, it is an incredible number to be pitching at a 1.25 ERA. There are other guys that are close, but at this point of the season, as it sits, if it ended today, Shane Bieber should be the Cy Young in the American League.
There's nothing at all that I can say to disagree with that.
Pitching, I definitely felt more confident in that one.
Yeah, I mean, so when she said, where does he fit? I looked straight at the contract. I mean, the guy's not even a free agent until 2025. So
no, he's going to be in Cleveland for a long time. They've picked up some young people and some young players in that trade for Mike Clevenger. I expect him to be in Cleveland for a while. I expect Cleveland to be mostly competitive for some time. I don't know that Cleveland will ever be a World Series contender for in the near future. They just don't seem to have it. They choked it away against the Cubs a couple of years back. And so I don't know that they'll rebound from that anytime soon, but they do have a guy in Bieber that's going to be on the team pitching well for the years to come. Now, on the National League side of things is where we could definitely get into an argument, and I'm giving a little bit of credit based on the expectation of what he was supposed to be, what he has been, and what he is this year. And my Cy Young Award pick for this season so far, if it ended today, goes to the Cubs starting pitcher, Yu Darvish. Yu Darvish has a 7-1 record. He is number one in wins in the National League. He is number one in ERA at a 1.44. But that's where, after those stats, we can start to argue a few other guys that have better in these next two. He's only fourth in strikeouts at 63, and he's tied for second in WHIP at 0.88. So he is pretty far down when it comes to strikeouts. You could argue a guy like DeGrom, who is also pitching well for ERA. He's got a great number of strikeouts, and he's also doing well with his WHIP, again, with walks plus hits per inning pitch. So he's not letting a lot of guys on base, but his win total isn't there. And unfortunately, he plays for the Mets. For DeGrom, if he played for almost any other team, I'd be willing to bet you he's right there at 1 or 2 when it comes to wins for the season. But he plays for the Mets, and they never seem to score runs just for him, right? So for me right now, it's Darvish, but this one I think you could argue a little bit more that another pitcher would be worthy of the award as well.
All right. I have to say DeGrom, for the sole reason of looking back on his 2 Cy Youngs already. He went 10-9 in 2018 and 11-8 in 2019. Clearly, the wins and losses don't matter for the or for the Cy Young Award anymore.
When you've been that dominant in other parts of the categories, absolutely. DeGrom has earned those Cy Youngs, in my opinion, hands down. I would never question the awards that he's won. He's one of the best pitchers that we've seen. He's a generational talent as well. And again, I just wish he wasn't with the Mets. The numbers that he would put up, it reminds me of like a Nolan Ryan in with the Rangers, right? Nolan Ryan.
He's only given up 9 runs this season.
Right. It's unreal the numbers he's put up. Again, I know a lot of people don't mind when the wins and losses. At the same time, what Darvish has put up and what he has meant to those Cubs is also hard to argue with. And so that's why I went with Darvish. And again, why I prefaced it by saying I think you can argue a little bit with the National League. And we both agreed you really can't argue with Bieber in the American League. It's pretty clear cut in the American League. National League, I think, will get a little tighter, especially as the season goes on. And if DeGrom starts to win 2 or 3 more games in a row, then it's going to make it even harder to argue against him, considering all the other numbers. And again, I just wish somebody would trade for DeGrom and get him out of that situation in general.
Why would Heather? Why would Liam Hendricks even be in the conversation? He's pitched 17.1 innings, so 3 games, and he's 2-0 with a 1.56 ERA. He just hasn't played enough. Under no circumstances is he gonna win Cy Young. There's no logical explanation you can give me to give somebody like that to Cy Young.
I would agree that's a name I've heard of, but not even close in my research for that position. He's not even close to even in the conversation of a pitcher that most people would even know who he is at this point, right? So we're heading towards the finish up on the day. One of the things I want to talk a little bit about, we're going to just touch real quick on a couple of the other divisions. So we've talked about the AL East, we talked about the AL Central. Let's talk a little bit about a team in the American League West. They are sitting just a little bit back out of the league. It's the Houston Astros, right? And the Houston Astros, in my opinion, look a lot like the Chicago White Sox, right? They got a lot of hitting talent. They've even actually been underperforming some of their stars, even though they're one of the better offenses. They've been underperforming. Altuve and those guys are not hitting well. Altuve is now on the injured list, and I think this will be a good chance for him to get his head right, get back out on the field, and then watch them make a run. Now, the only downside is losing Verlander, and then of course Garrett Cole going to New York. That team does not have the pitching depth, so I think that if they're going to win, they're going to have to try to find a way to win.
I can't get my eyebrow any higher.
All right, what you got a thought? What is it?
They're not living up to expectation? You mean they're not beating on drums anymore?
See, I was trying to avoid some of that conversation. It's hard not to go towards it. So, but watch out for Houston. Oakland's going to win that division. Houston's going to get into the playoffs, and it's going to be an interesting race there. Let's jump to the National League. We got the National League East, might be one of the more exciting finishes to a division in the National League. Atlanta and Philly are playing very well. Harper and Real Muto are playing great baseball for Philly, starting to come along. And Philly went out and picked up some bullpen arms that could make a difference down the stretch. Atlanta went and got Tommy Malone, who has not lived up to expectations yet, but it's also just one starter, right? So Atlanta needed to do a little bit more to get a little deeper, and they have some injury concerns down in Atlanta as well. I personally think that Philly will have the deeper run over Atlanta in the playoffs this year, but Philly and Atlanta will be 2 of the teams that will make it from the NL East.
Can you just refresh my memory to who last year's World Series champion was?
Last year's World Series champion is the Washington Nationals.
Ooh, so you're telling me that they are going from first to worst?
They have not had a great return season. Of course, losing when you lose, Zimmerman choosing to opt out for the season. We talk about Anthony Rendon heading to the Angels. You take away a couple of big bats. And pitching hasn't been great. Hitting's been okay. You lose to a couple of names, and the World Series slump. I don't know if it's a real thing, but it just doesn't look that great for them this season. So yes, Nationals went from first to worst.
Just wanted to make sure I was right. I knew I was.
There you go. Now on to the National League Central. You got the Cubs on a 3-game losing streak, which is only really big considering they lost to St. Louis, who hasn't played as many games due to the COVID situation. They missed several games in a row, but the Cardinals are on a streak. I actually had picked the Cardinals as one of the teams that might end up in the World Series because of the way they play. I think they're deep. They're well coached. They're a seasoned team. I would still expect them to play well. The Cubs are going to be hit or miss. Darvish has to continue to play the way he has, and their offense needs to get a little bit more kind of in line. They're a little all over the place right now, but I think they'll get it correct. The Cardinals are pushing hard. The Brewers, they're done. The Cincinnati Reds, they're done. And then, of course, the Pirates, they're done, right? So it's the Cubs and Cardinals coming out of that one. And then in the National League West, it's really a 2-horse race again. You got the Padres and the Dodgers. We talked about two of our front runners for MVP, Tatis, as well as Mookie Betts. That's something there. Now, Heather, I'm going to jump on this one just because I am the biggest Milwaukee Brewers fan you may ever meet. The Milwaukee Brewers have zero chance. Mathematically, or they are in it. So technically, at that point, they have a chance. But as a Brewers fan, die hard. If you were in my basement right now, you'd be surrounded by ball and glove logos. They don't have a chance. They don't have any starting pitching depth. Their bullpen is erratic, and their offense is one of the worst teams when it comes to consistency I've ever seen in Major League Sports.
Gavin, never suggest people go to your basement ever again.
It's a man cave. It's one of these days I'll show everybody what my basement looks
like. There's a hole in the ground too. Yeah.
But the Brewers are for all intents and purposes, they're done. Craig Counsell keeps making decisions that in a 162 game season make a ton of sense, but in a 60 game season make absolutely no sense. That team was built for 162 games, was not built for 60 games. So I would expect them to be back into the fold next year, but as for this season, they do not have what it takes to make any sort of playoff run in any way, shape, or form. It just is not going to happen. As much as it pains me to say it, because I am one of the biggest Brewer fans, it's just not going to happen. And as of right now, the Brewers are well out of the running. They're in 8, 9, 10, 11th place when it comes to the overall standings, so they're not even close to making it into the playoffs.
That's only 2 games out from the Rockies and the Giants. They do actually still have a chance.
They do have a chance, but you got a team like even the Marlins playing well, and if you look behind that as well, you still have the Reds are also they're basically right there with the Brewers, and the Brewers cannot beat the Reds.
All right, the easiest way to put this, the only teams that are actually eliminated and stand no chance are the Diamondbacks, the Pirates, and the Nationals.
At this point, mathematically, those are the only ones that are out of the equation. As a Brewers fan, I don't see them making enough of a push. I hope I'm wrong. I hope next week they're on a 5-game win streak and you guys can all laugh in my face. I truly, truly, truly hope that's the case, because then I'd be smiling because the Brewers are playing well. So, but with that, we're going to give you guys the rest of your Monday evening back. It has been an absolute pleasure. Jake, thank you so much for filling in for Nick. We always appreciate you having you on. And before you sign off on the stream, we're going to pop up the picture for the rest of the week. Tomorrow at, Jake, make sure I say the times correctly, at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Yes.
We have the new Whiskey Hour guys coming on to talk about sports in general. They're fantastic. For those of you who were watching me yesterday, you got a chance to meet 2 of the 3-headed monster. Those guys will be on tomorrow at that time, followed immediately by Jake and Nick is Nick with you tomorrow?
Honestly, I have no idea. If not, we have Austin and
there you go. We'll have Jake
Jake
and a special host with us tomorrow for the 60-yard dash following the Whiskey Hour guys. So we want to thank you guys so much for spending your evening with me. We look forward to seeing you guys again the rest of the week. And if nothing else, I will see all my Circus Monkey fans again on Sunday. Jake, throw that picture up and send us off.